Welcome to Let's Humanize the Workplace. My name is Vivian Acquah and I'm the Workplace Wellness Advocate. And today's topic is going to be amazing, it's going to be epic, and we are going to talk about emotional intelligence. But before we are going to start having that conversation, I just want to highlight something. So, you might have seen something about Amplify DEI, where I am inviting 72 guest speakers to share their awesomeness regarding diversity, equity and inclusion, and it's happening really soon. So next month, 28th till 30th of September, you're going to see the Netflix version of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you want to know more, just go to amplifydei.com, or you can chase me regarding that. And I also want to share the following. So I mentioned that we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. And before we are going to start that conversation, I just copy and paste this from the Cambridge Dictionary, and I'm going to read it out loud. So, the ability to understand the way people feel and react, and to use this skill to make good judgments, repeat good judgments, and to avoid or solve problems. Especially, I just want to highlight that last sentence. So, use this skill to make good judgments and to avoid or solve problems. Okay, I'm going to introduce the panel. So, this is the amazing panel that I have for today, and I'm going to bring them on live. Let me see and bring them here. And first off, I'm going to introduce Quinn. So, Quinn is a Humaneer who helps professionals bridge the divide between technical and emotional skills required to excel in the modern world. Teresa Quinlan is an executive coach and leadership transformation specialist through emotional intelligence, and she's also the host of the podcast TNTESQ, Exploding the Status Quo, Presenting Ways of Thinking Differently. And Josie Nakash is helping companies humanize their leadership and brand by applying advanced concepts of integral thinking of everything we do in the workplace and business. And last but not least is Jamelle Lindo. He is an emotional intelligence leadership coach, trainer, and speaker with over 11 years of diverse learning and development experience. Welcome, everybody. It's a mouthful with all your introductions, but
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
welcome to
Thank you,
be
Vivian.
here. And
Great to
let
be
me
here.
start with you, Quinn. What is your connection with humanizing the workplace?
Well, I jokingly say it starts with me because it's something where I try and bring this stuff to work every day. As externally, other than the people that I work directly with, I also help other. My background's in engineering, and so I have some programs that are tailored specifically for architects and engineers. And really trying to do what we're doing today is bridge this divide between what is EQ, how does it relate to a technical field that doesn't feel so touchy feely. Beyond that, I also work with other groups and collaborated with other folks. Some of those are on this call today, and reaching out to other organizations. And what's great about this is EQ. Whereas I come from an engineer's perspective, EQ is something that we can all use, and it doesn't matter what business you're in or what you're doing. It relates to all of us, and so it even relates to what we're doing at home and at work. But I've been able to find my message and the way that I bring it works with people in different non-technical organizations as well. And so I collaborate to do, individual and group coaching in those environments as well.
Thank you, Quinn. And Josie?
I'm a marketing expert. I'm a startup expert here in Israel. Um, and the whole world of marketing is about to change really drastically because this is a whole new stage. Everybody's going to have to adjust their marketing. Everything's going to have to become much more human. And all those new human examples are going to be embedded into the brand. So the future is really shifting and it's going to be amazing. And you're going to look back a year from now and marketing is going to be completely different. It's going to be all human. But first, we have to have those positive human examples. First, we have to create that amazing environment and those good vibes and get everyone in that natural high from connection, and then we will be able to transform brands.
Thank you. Teresa.
Here. I just love when Josie talks about it because I get inspired with her passion when she speaks about such a critical element to what we're exposed to every single day. When I think about humanizing the workplace, I'm like, well, yeah, we really can't do the workplace without humans in it. And emotional intelligence and emotions is just a human experience day in and day out, minute by minute, second by second. It's what we're experiencing all the time. The question for me is always about, are you aware of what's happening? And so the work that I am so passionate about and so fulfilled by is helping people to make that connection. So when they are experiencing people and things, or even themselves on a regular basis, they just have better experiences overall. They're really tipping that well-being scale, and they're moving themselves towards greater level of happiness. Sounds so simple.
I love it. I really love it. And Jamelle.
Yeah. So the question being, what is the connection there between being human? And I think the first thing is that I'm human, and it's the most obvious thing, at least I hope. But that's where we start, right? With the fact that I'm human, you're human, we're all humans. And to truly understand each other, we need to understand, well, what's driving and motivating us at any given moment. And we know by not only our own experience, but also by the research that emotions are driving us. So I think that we're in an amazing place right now where this is starting to become a conversation. I think if you were looking at this 10, 15, 20 years ago, there would be no openness to it. But today we're in a place where we're starting to ask, how can we find the line between business performance and results and the human experience? And to me, you can't bridge that gap without emotional intelligence, which I normally just describe as being smart about emotions.
Yeah. I love that you shared something about 10 years ago. It was something maybe forbidden. And that's why I'm going to this question. Why is emotional intelligence a hidden key to successful leadership? And I will start with you, Jamelle.
A hidden key to leadership success. So I don't know so much that it's hidden. I think that it's open. I think it's in our faces. I think when you take a look at your day and the way that you interact with leaders, if you're a leader, the way that you interact with yourself, you can't ignore the fact that emotion is steeped in every aspect of what you do. When it comes to influencing, when it comes to leading, when it comes to delivering, tough feedback, having difficult conversations, getting people engaged and motivated, it all has to do with emotion. I think what makes it hidden is that we haven't truly accepted that in the business world. That's the first thing. The second thing is that once we come to the place of acceptance, we now have to become practitioners and look at ways that we can begin to integrate this into what we do. So taking the steps to actually make it happen is where I see the challenge right now.
And I mean it.
Okay, good. I'm saying to myself, I kept that pretty short, hopefully.
Love it. Josie.
We're emotional beings. And up until now, we've sort of been faking everything. This whole corporate setup that we had, it was all superficial. And even looking at it from a marketing perspective, if you go into any website, you get to that cold page, products, solutions. We're heading now into a very human stage. Everything is about to become more human. And companies have to be more human. They have to show up as being very caring and caring about their people and caring about people in general, caring about the world. And so it's all really, it's about this energy between us. It's about how we connect with other people. That's the key we're going to unlock now, because we were on a stage of self-development, self-improvement, self-this, self-help. And now we're transitioning into a stage of a collective stage where we have to advance harmoniously together. So the key to unlocking all the good in this next stage is in the connections between us. And the connections between humans is all around our emotions and how we balance those, how we harmonize them, how we create an environment with all the diversity between us, how this creates, even right here on this screen, look at us, this creates a perfect whole because we're all so different and we're all, this is the future.
Awesome.
Quinn, how do you follow up on that one?
You don't. I need my own awesome card. I think to echo it a little bit, I think unfortunately majority of people who have been successful to this point have done it in spite of emotional intelligence, and I think that's why this image that we have of this is what it means to be a leader, this command and control, the things that we have seen that have worked for the last 100 years, we're finally at a place where we're seeing the flaws in those, and those aren't working anymore. But up until this point, a lot of people were really, nervous about, well, I've got this position now, I'm a leader, so I've got to act like a leader, and what leadership meant. Just like Jamelle said, 10 years ago, that was very different from what we're seeing it and knowing it to be now. And we're seeing that model breakdown, especially with what's going on in the world right now. It just does not work in this environment. And so that's what's been hidden, is that, as Josie said, this is natural. This is who we are. This is how we want to be. This is what nature, how we were intended to be. But we've been suppressing that for so long that it's been put out of sight, and that's what makes it hidden.
Thank you. Love it. Teresa?
Well, I agree somewhat with Jamelle's original point. I don't know if it's hidden. I kind of think sometimes it's hidden because of what we measure. And so when we're measuring in the workplace performance metrics, very seldomly do we see really intense emotional intelligence observations and measurements to direct bottom line results, even though we know they are critical to those bottom line results. And we can walk that all the way back to kindergarten when we get our report card and someone measures our IQ. They're also measuring our EQ. It's in the comments box, but we don't call it that. And we see our teachers saying things like, Josie works well with her classmates. Quinn takes initiative to help other students that are struggling. Jamelle stands up at the front of the class and speaks his truth when it comes to show and tell. We see them there. What I think ends up happening is we have standardized testing around IQ, and this is the draw, is you have to know what you're going to get graded on. This is how you pass. And we don't have the value add of that comments box really making why people progress forward. So to Quinn's point, when we have people succeeding in life now, we know there's something about them. Why didn't the valedictorian become the most successful person at the 25th reunion? It's because they missed those skills. They had all the IQ in the world. They had none of the EQ. And the kid that was the one who wooed everyone together and charged forward, they became the CEO of the most successful Fortune 500 company. And those are the things that we see them. They are in place. They're not hidden. We're just not giving them the attention that they need to have for what really defines success.
Definitely.
So all we need to do in school is teach kids to be human, basically.
Turns out.
Aren't kids
already are.
When I look at my son, the way his school approaches it has a lot of human elements, and along the way kids seem to lose it as they become older, as a teenager or maybe as an adult. There is a phase where we aren't human, or we aren't acting on those human elements that we see kids have right now.
It really comes down to conditioning. Right. And how we condition people. So if you were to go to, let's say, a third world country, and you were to ask, a bunch of people there if they could read and write, chances are they may not be able to. But if you go to a first world country like where we are here in Canada, and you ask 10 people, it's highly likely that all of them will be able to. And the reason for that is because we have very structured systems in place to make sure that people are literate, to make sure that they can read, to make sure that they can write. And that's why we have the society that we have today. But on the other end, when you take a look at emotions, if I were to ask you guys, have you been put through any formalized, structured process to help you understand your emotions or your thinking and your thoughts? And the answer to that is no. The truth is, if you know about those things, it's likely because you went out, you ventured out to learn about it, or you've gone down the wrong path emotionally to such an extent where you had to seek that professional help and support. But we don't
where
have
everything exploded.
Correct. But what we don't have is the conditioning. What we don't have are the systems in place that help us to learn those emotional skills, which is why we see what we see today, which is really a world of emotional illiteracy. And that shows up in leadership. It shows up with a lack of engagement. It shows up with toxic environments and environments that are not psychologically safe, where people can't be at their best. And so I believe that that is the root cause of what we're dealing with here.
Not to mention all the statistics. Sorry, depression, suicide, divorce, addiction.
Yes, definitely. You're both jump starting all the questions. So let me jump back to what you shared about the lack of not having, or not the lack of not activating your EI. So what happens when leaders are not doing that? What happens when they are not activating that? Can you start, Teresa?
Catastrophe, like in a word. That's what happens. Actually, organizations will call it toxic workplace environment. That's what they'll call it, right? And so anytime we think of, if I'm not activating my emotional intelligence, if we just look at the self first, so I'm not activating my EI, so I'm completely unaware of what emotion I'm experiencing. So then I'm also unaware of how it's impacting me, which might mean I'm heading straight down that spiral of burnout. I'm not aware of how it's impacting other people, which means I'm potentially contributing to disengagement. Why are all of my team players on wellness days? Turns out I'm the common denominator in everyone's experience. My reactions and interactions with other people become ones in which nothing gets solved. There is no compassion. There is no trust. So there is no psychological safety. So we don't create well together. We don't co-create well together. We don't collaborate. We don't decision make. We don't do stuff together. And that's sort of, the end of the world is coming definition of if I don't activate my emotional intelligence. The truth is everyone has elements of emotional intelligence skills. We do. We learn them along the way. We pick them up. We may not be balanced in them. We may not be developed in all of them, but we do have some emotional intelligence. It's not that everyone has none. Yes.
Quinn. Quinn. Are you there, Quinn? Or, okay, let me go to Jamelle.
Yes, and just run me by the question again, please.
So the question is, what happens when leaders are not activating their EI?
Yeah. So a series of things happen. I think the number one thing that you're going to see is a negative and toxic workplace culture. These are places where people feel unsafe, where they're not sure if they can trust their peers. If they do trust their peers, it's backstabbing. There's a lot of conversations that happen behind people's backs. And people don't want to be there. And because they don't want to be there, they don't perform at their best. And they're not able to collaborate effectively. So it's low absenteeism, it's high turnover, it's low performance, it's low engagement, it's all of these things, right? And so if the leader is not tapping into their ability to be mindful and aware of themselves, and thus be mindful and aware of other people at the level of thought and at the level of emotion, then these are the kind of problems that end up fostering. And when you don't have the right company culture, then it doesn't matter how brilliant your people are. It doesn't matter how high their IQ is. Right? It doesn't matter how brilliant your strategy is. You could have the best strategy in the world. If you're deploying that with people who don't like each other, who don't want to be there, and who don't have the emotional climate to create success, then it's almost the same as having no strategy at all, because it's not going to be able to deploy effectively.
A big piece of that, Vivian, a big piece of that is discretionary effort. So we have low EQ across the board. People come to work and they'll give 40% because that's what everyone is either willing to give and willing to accept.
Yeah.
So when Jamelle says this climate of toxicity exists, and then also it's like having no strategy at all. Exactly, because no one's actually putting in the effort for it. I mean, this is the extreme demonstration of zero emotional intelligence. So we do see it. We absolutely see it.
I need to address Brian. Brian is spamming the comments. So definitely, Brian, I will ask your questions after this one. I will definitely ask them. So thank you for sharing them. And Quinn.
Yes. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries. I'm glad that you're back.
Yeah.
Can you share what happens when leaders are not activating their EI, or maybe something that you experience as a
Yeah, I
person?
mean, there's a funny story. Teresa knows, and anyone who listened, when I was on her podcast, I taught one of the most extreme examples I've seen of this is had a senior engineer that I was working with tell one of our clients in a client meeting that you must be stupid because you don't understand what it is I'm trying to explain. And that was just, from and this is me, a year out of college, like, is this really what the world of engineering, and so, there's just so many things that fell apart because of that you can see. And so I think that again is, again, on a very toxic level, or an extreme level, that's it at its worst. But I think what also happens is we see this where it doesn't happen in quite that extreme, and so it's sort of tolerated. And that's the really, it's the person where it's bad, but it's not so bad. But then 5 years in, like, you are just, a shell of yourself. And why is it? Because you've been working in this environment that has just been slowly kind of sucking the life out of you. It's not like they come in and just scream or yell at you or beat you upside the head with something that's like, very visceral, and you're like, okay, I've got to get away from this. It's like this more, just over time it accumulates. And so I think that's the piece where it can really
It seems like you're
damage.
addressing the behavior of microaggression, which has a macro impact for the person who's experiencing it, and also has a macro impact for the company later, especially when you have platforms like this one, or social media, or LinkedIn. People are talking, and people know a way to express themselves, and know a way to form a group where they are not saying that they are retaliating towards the company, but they are addressing certain things that should not be happening, especially when you are striving for diversity and inclusion and want, a more human approach within your company. That's not what you need to look for. So are you allowed to share what happened to that person or that colleague? Or
this was 20 years ago. So what happened actually was that, we had to do a lot of damage control with that client, but then they were also put in a position where they never were facing outside of the company. They're put in an internal role, could only talk to people with inside the company. And there's a lot of discussion around, I think that was the right thing back then, but what I know now and what should have happened, there's a lot of other things that could have been done. But I mean, and to me, the big lesson there is it directly, what was just a 5-second slip of who they were, created all this, headache and, one pain to the person who was said, which is, horrible. But then there was real, if we want to talk about how it impacts the workplace, a real cost associated with that. And I think that's the piece that we're really starting to understand now is, having low EQ costs you money. And that's something where, as business leaders look at this, it's not something, it's a nice to have, it's a must have. And if we're going to really be our best selves and our most efficient company, we need to recognize that this is part of the bottom line.
Preach. Preach, Josia.
The cost of not dealing with the human ego behind all this, beneath everything, beneath a silly comment like that is the human ego. That person just erupted, and that person may not have had control of it or whatever, but we're seeing this everywhere now in the world. The human ego is erupting, and it's not going to be enough to just tame it. We really need to understand what we're dealing with. And the only way we're going to be able to do anything about it now that we're in a collective stage is together in these circles and this collective intelligence, and create a positive flow of energy between humans so that things like that won't happen. Because before we were in an environment where, one person could just jump forward, and now the environment, we understand we're living in an interdependent system. Very transparent, and we're all dependent on each other. So it really makes you think. And kids need to grow up with this whole different programming, different wiring, with an integral approach inside them, that there's this collective. I'm part of this collective. How can I contribute? How can I be a positive part of the collective and not a negative part? And I just wanted to say the foundation of the startups in Israel, where people came out of the army together, and in the army people get thrown together, rich, poor, different colors, religions, whatever, And they come out of the army and they create these startups together, and they're like brothers. They've been through everything together. So they have this amazing foundation. I'm not saying they're perfect, and of course they have huge egos. Our startup founders in Israel, they're very successful, but it's a good foundation at least for the company.
That sounds awesome. I also want to ask the question that Brian is asking. What is different when EQ is prioritized and valued? So, Teresa.
Well, we could just swing it directly to the other side of that pendulum. So the first thing that we'll find consistency. We'll find consistency in our behaviors. So I like to describe emotional intelligence as a ball. And when you have well-developed emotional intelligence and you're balanced in all of the skills, you have a nice smooth ball. And no matter what's in front of you, that ball just continues to roll smooth and consistent. The obstacle, the person, the challenge, the resource, the time, the energy, whatever. When our emotional intelligence is, I'm great at assertiveness, not so great at empathy. I'm great at independence, not so great at my self-regard. Then we have this ball that's a little bit wonky. So sometimes, depending upon the situation, depending upon my mood, I might respond in an emotionally intelligent way. And sometimes I might not. And so I'm inconsistent. And this becomes the chip at the wellness of the people within that organization that wears them down. And then we have what happens is sometimes we have just low emotional intelligence across the board. So we have a teeny tiny little ball. And that teeny tiny little ball, it rolls smooth. We're consistent. We're just consistently, I don't want to say bad as a label. We're just consistently bad at recognizing our emotions and their impact. And those kinds of companies just don't exist because they can't. They don't. They financially could not exist. So basically what we see is we can see consistency in wellness of the individuals that are part of that environment, which means they're happy and they're performing.
That's what we are aiming for, right? That's the best thing that a company can do at the moment. So Quinn, how do you see that? How would you answer this?
Yeah, I mean, to echo, I love that ball analogy. If you think about traditionally what HR is looked at, you look at engagement, you look at innovation, and you look at retention. All three of those things are boosted by EQ. And so, the productivity that you get out of having a culture that embraces emotional intelligence, this is what you get as a result of it. That camaraderie. I mean, the high performance, the stuff, Josie was talking about, having been, in a military college, having played, college sports, that was one of the things that was great about it. We came from, tell you, I had a group. This was a guy in 2001 whose family didn't have electricity until his junior year of high school. Was on my football team. Was there with a guy whose dad was VP of, a large multinational. And so, those people are in this environment where, we didn't play in the same playground, but here we were in this environment together and we learn from each other and the things that we get. And, that piece, because of that and the skills they take from that, we're able to integrate into, really bringing this diversity of thought together and, all the things that we know to be so important. That's what you're getting. And we, no other time do we need to be innovative than right now. And that's the piece that you get when you.
Thank you. Josie.
What did Brian ask again? How do we prioritize EQ in the company? What is different?
And value. Yeah.
It's about getting out of this space of the narrow human ego, the individual, and tapping into the collective intelligence. That's what it is for me. It's not about, individual performance anymore. It's how to create an environment where, the environment influences us in a positive way to be our best, to reach our maximum potential as humans, where we get this natural high. We want to jump out of bed in the morning and run to work or, run to Zoom. We're so inspired and the creativity is flowing in that environment because we've created an environment for people to flourish in. So that's what that kind of place looks like.
I love it. Where can I sign up for that place?
You can 2030. We're aiming for 2030.
What? 2030? No.
You were in a circle like that with us yesterday. When was it? Yesterday or the day before? That's what it feels like. Didn't you feel amazing when you came out?
True. True.
We
Jamelle.
get a natural high from being together like this.
True.
I'd like to really build off of that. I think that the question really is, what does the emotionally intelligent workplace look like? And I want for you to imagine, going to work and knowing that your leader truly cares about you as an individual. And that might sound obvious, but for the most part, most of us feel like our leaders care about the work that we're doing, about the performance, about the numbers. But what if they cared about you as an individual? What if you felt totally and completely supported by them, not just as a worker, but as a human being? And what it also looks like is when you collaborate with people, there's trust, right? And you don't have this sense that you're going to get thrown under the bus. You feel safe enough to bring forward new ideas. You're recommending new ideas. You don't feel that if you recommend something that doesn't make sense, that you're going to be attacked. There's an openness. There's an authenticity. When people are, when your leader is sharing their vision and the way that they want to move things forward, you can feel that it's coming from a true place. And it's not because they just want to achieve a target or they want to achieve a number. It's when employees understand the bigger meaning of what they're doing. Oftentimes, employees get locked into the day-to-day, to the mundane, to the task at hand, and they forget how that's actually connected with the company's vision and how that company's vision is moving the planet forward and what we're looking to accomplish. So
they forget or they aren't included in the conversations for them to remember that it has a bigger goal.
They're included in those conversations, and they're very clear on how what they do in the micro is connected to the macro. So what you see now is employees who are actually connected to what they do from a true place of meaning. And so those are just a few things, to name a few. I think Quinn nailed it when he talked about all of the KPIs, all of the measures of that, things like attendance and performance and employee engagement. But I think it's also about the actual experience of being at work.
Yes, definitely. So one of the questions that came by, and it's actually one of my questions, is how can leaders amplify EI in their team? So we first discussed about what can they do for themselves, and now we want to activate it within the team members. Quinn?
I think the first thing I say is space. Create that space where these that safety is there. And if you're modeling it yourself, you're creating, and it's saying, okay, I want these ideas to come, and also recognizing where they are. Some of the work we do, it's like, well, my team's all extroverts or my team's all introverts, and it's like, one group you can't stop from talking, one you can't get to talk. And you're just saying, well, I just don't get it. I asked them what they wanted and they didn't tell me. It's like, it's understanding how to best get that information out of those people, and give them, say, I see you, I see where you're at. Here's what we're trying to accomplish here. How can we, start working towards this? Or if you've got somebody that's taking up too much space, one of the things I love about the work Josie does is, when you're in a circle, everyone has a chance to speak, right? And so you're making sure that, it does include everyone that's there. And so I think it's really, showing that you value this. Don't just say, well, how are you feeling? Okay, check. And then you move on to the next, it's like, really sit with that and pull that out and say, okay, I do value who you are as a person. I want to know how you are and how you're feeling, because that's going to, resonate through everything else that we do here as an individual and as a team. And so really, sit with that. Don't just use it as, okay, I checked that box, let's move on.
Yeah. That's a very good one. I see this so many times when looking back at my own career that I didn't used to speak up like I'm doing right now. So I was very introverted. I still am from time to time. And I most of the time kept my mouth shut. And I didn't realize that during meetings, that's the time where you can speak up and can share your ideas. But I didn't feel that I wasn't encouraged, but I also didn't feel like, okay, who's going to listen to me? And you sharing that, it's valuable that also managers and leaders or whoever encourage people to speak up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's my
Teresa.
awesome card.
Thank you, Teresa.
So Jamelle and I call ourselves #EQ ninjas.
Yeah.
What we talk about quite frequently is, as you have to have walked the path. So basically, if you want to amplify your team's emotional intelligence, then as the leader, you need to be walking the path of emotional intelligence. You need to be applying and practicing the skills of EQ all the time. And when you fumble, because you will, because it is a lifetime of skill practicing, then you dust yourself off and you get back up and you tell everyone, look, I fell over. I know why I fell over. This is how I'm fixing it. And how you amp up for your team is you take the processes that you do internally in your head for your own EQ and you verbalize them outside for them to hear it. And that's what we call coaching. So leaders have to amp up their own coaching skills. I don't tell someone how to grow their emotional intelligence. I pose a reflection coaching question that gets them to think about it. And what eventually happens as they do that time and time and time again, it's just like anything that I teach a skill. If I prompt the reflection and the thinking, eventually the person learns the prompt without me having to say it anymore.
Yeah.
And they start to implement and they start to create and they start to do without me needing to do the coaching aspect for them, basically. And that's a simplified version of how do we as leaders begin to amplify. We first walk the path and do the work day in and day out. And then we take what's going on the inside in our own journey and we verbalize it on the outside in coaching.
And also, I would also like to add, leaders don't have to do it alone. I mean, there are amazing people here on this panel who can guide you during this process. So know that you don't have to do it alone if you need help. That's it.
That's what I was going to say. I'm like, of course, the best way to collapse time is to get an EQ coach that can just leverage your skill set and push you in that direction faster than you'll be able to do on your own.
Yes. Jamelle.
I have to echo what Teresa has said here. You know, Teresa, we're spending too much time together. That's what's going on. One thing that I want to add to this is, I get that question all the time. Jamelle, how do I enhance the emotional intelligence of my team?
Yeah.
And if I'm being honest, more often than not, that's just another way of saying, how do I get my team to do what I want them to do? That's really the question that they're asking there, right? So we have to remove that ego, as Josie was saying, that says, it's my job to get the most out of these people. Oh, EQ, that's how you get performance. How do I get them to have EQ, right? That mindset is such a different mindset to, I now need to embark on this journey myself and enhance my own emotional intelligence so that I am the example. And then by being the example, my team will naturally and most often subconsciously mirror those behaviors. So when I step into the meeting room and I ask, what is your perspective on this? What are your thoughts about this? Guys, we just had this situation happen. Where is everybody at? How are you feeling? Quite naturally, the same conversations will start taking place outside of that boardroom when I'm not present. And to me, culture is about what happens when nobody is quote unquote looking. Yeah. And influence is the best way to be able to create that. So I have to echo what Teresa is saying here and say that you need to enhance your own EQ. Now, what you need to know about that is that EQ is a marathon, not a sprint. All right. You are not going to become emotionally intelligent this week, in 2 weeks, or even in a month. #EQ ninjas. You got to check that out. It's not going to happen, right?
Copyright it.
Yeah, this is a long-term journey. It's just like when you say, I'm going to get in shape. If you want to get in shape, you can't expect to go to the gym once or twice and get the job done, right? You need to be committed to a 3-month plan.
Is this the EI church or something?
What was that? It's the Church of EI. Hallelujah. That's what you know.
Amen.
That's what it is.
Oh, love it. Love it. I'm getting goosebumps by you all. I am speechless with everything that you're saying. And even though some of the things I already know, the way you say things, it's just like I'm sitting in the Black church where you all are preaching, and it comes to me. And I hope that, you know, for the audience who are listening right now, this is an episode where you have to listen, then you have to listen again, because there are so many things shared during this episode that I'm just like, whoa. Josie.
So, do
Sorry.
you remember that I wrote that I might have a different perspective?
Well, share it.
I want to suggest that in the circle, doing collective intelligence, or, you know, whatever you want to call it, going through this process together in the circle, working on all these things, talking about all these human things like we did the other day in our ego workshop, I want to suggest that a person can accelerate their development by 2 or 3 years compared to normal development. Like, what, I don't know, maybe it's this individual coaching, whatever. I want to suggest that the circle is 1,000 times more powerful. That because we're all mixing our thoughts and desires in the circle, we can accelerate our progress so much faster by mixing with people who are different than us. And that's what really expands all our consciousness and maximizes our human potential and actually increases our ego, but in a good way, because at the same time, we're creating this positive flow of human energy. So this excess ego is being redirected around the circle, and we're all benefiting from it, instead of when a person's alone and, you know, acts out on their ego. So I want to suggest that the circle is the best way to pump up, amplify the EQ.
Love it. I am lost.
Can I drop in a little engineering?
Yes, drop it.
Well, the way I look at it, and I appreciate what Josie's saying, because I think it's so true. You know, I think the circle is like that, you know, accelerator, you know, like the electron accelerator, you know, like, so once you step into that circle, but the thing is, what I find is if you don't fully step into it, and so that self-awareness piece, so if I'm not ready, so if I dip my toe into the circle, then I'm just kind of in it. You know, and so unless I'm fully aware and say, okay, I'm going to go into the circle, that's the piece where you're not going to feel that full acceleration unless you're fully able to and aware to say, okay, I'm ready to step in, and you're gonna get that back. And, you know, this is one of the things that's interesting. Again, you talk about introverts and extroverts. You know, we all have, you know, we need balance, right? And the best model comes from when we have these other parts that kind of average us out. And so that's the piece that you get. And we always tell people, is like, well, I'm most comfortable being an introvert. I was like, well, that's where you're most comfortable, but where's your most growth? And if you give up a little bit of yourself to get into the accelerator, then you get that bigger energy that's coming. And that's the piece I think we need to, you know, to recognize. And that's where it's going to come from, having that safe group, you know, that the psychological safety we see in teams is so valuable. That's what it does to accelerate us.
Vivian, I know that we don't have too much time left, and there's been so much goodness so far from everybody on this panel.
You talk, yes.
I just wanted to say, is it possible to share something practical, right? Something that people can actually do to start enhancing their own emotional intelligence? Because oftentimes I feel that people walk away with these concepts, but not with something that they can actually do. So a really simple strategy and technique that I normally start clients with is start by creating a daily journal. And all you're going to do on this journal is you are going to write out the events throughout the day that triggered you emotionally, either positively or negatively. And then you're going to write out and find like 3 or 4 events per day. Then write out the emotions that were triggered by those events, positive and negative.
Standing in line at the supermarket.
There you go, right? Especially right now with everything that's happening. It's crazy. It's a zoo out there. Then write out, you know, the thoughts that you were telling yourself that drove those emotions. Now, if you could do that practice over the course of 30 days, what you'll start to recognize is that there are trends and patterns in the things that you're experiencing and the things that are triggering you. Once you start to recognize that, then you're going to be more proactive about your day. You're going to realize, oh, that triggers me, or, oh, that person triggers me. So then you start to change your approach because you're adapting to what you're seeing instead of acting based on previous conditioning. And really what you're doing there is you're rewriting your own conditioning. And that's where people start to take control of themselves and their future, both professionally and personally. And the beautiful part about this process is that when you start doing it, you're not going to see only a difference at work. what will happen is you'll become a better person at work, a better leader, a better professional, but you're also going to become a better husband. You're going to become a better student, a better wife, a better sister, a better friend. So I'd recommend something very simple like that to start your EQ development journey.
And it also helps with raising your awareness with, when you were talking, I was so reminded about that quote, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. And once you write that down, that will help you with those trigger moments, or will make you realize that maybe you need to leave your environment to be happy, whatever environment that is. That can be in a relationship, or that can be in your work environment, whatever environment. I'm not encouraging, so don't blame me for leaving a bad relationship, because that's not the encouragement. I'm just wanting, I'm just planting those seeds together with the experts for you to realize that sometimes you have to leave that environment for you to grow.
But don't you think it's amazing the way the pandemic gave us all this EQ injection? And
Yeah.
I know when I'm in line at the supermarket, I'm a much nicer person than I was a few months ago. Like, just for example, we've all grown from,
Yeah.
but look what nature had to do, slam on the brakes, put us into lockdown, shift our lives upside down for us to, see this human growth, for us to be better humans. Look what nature had to do.
Yeah.
And maybe, Vivian, that quote that you gave, 10%, 90%, maybe it's time to shift that to life is 100% based on your choice of design. Because that 10% of it's happening to me is a life by default, which is often why people feel off balance. And generally we call that, I feel unwell, I feel off. Sometimes we feel it and we can name it. We can identify why. It's like, I didn't get a workout in today. I didn't sleep well last night. I know these things are contributing to how I feel today. And sometimes we're just operating in autopilot, and other people are telling us, are you okay? Like, something seems a little off. We need to pay attention to when people say that to us. And strategies around balance come down to a life by design. Am I choosing the things that I'm dedicating myself to? In EQ, it's our self-actualization. And I want to contribute an activity just like Jamelle did, is being able to place ourselves at the center and identify what are all the areas of my life that are meaningful and fulfilling to me. So I might have my husband, my children, my pet, hobbies. I might have my health. I could have work, community, volunteer, travel, finance. Like, there could be a lot of circles that surround you, meaning and fulfilling. Great. When we take a look at that, we have an opportunity to say, where am I dedicating my time? How much of my time?
Yeah.
And what positive, emotional, pleasant experiences do I gain from that? Now, where am I not? In the things that I've identified and meaningful to me, am I not spending any time, which means I'm lost in fulfillment in a specific area of meaning? And it could be something as simple as, I'm not gardening, and I love to garden. I'm not in nature, and nature grounds me, and I haven't been doing these things. And it's a simple exercise in identifying and starting to tweak the dial in how we choose to spend our time. And when we start to reach greater levels of fulfillment in that way, emotionally, we tend to balance out. We have greater sense of well-being. And that even amplifies our capacity in Jamelle's exercise sometimes, of being able to go, well, now that I feel well, I can actually even pay attention to what was going on today, because before I was just in this spiral of disarray and chaos. I can't even pay attention to how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I love it. I'm just letting everything marinate, but I'm also curious about, where do you want to see this all forward? So, going to the last question, Josie, what is your wish for 2025 when it comes to humanizing the workplace and emotional intelligence? What do you want to see? Maybe it's starting, or do you hope?
I've been talking to companies about this for a while, and they don't get it yet, that it's, especially if you're an international company, you need to bring the whole global team together. They need to interact. They need to through workshops together, not about sales, not about training, not about profits. They need to go through human experiences, emotional human workshops together, like the one we did the other day about the ego. And they need to be in breakout rooms. And imagine it's people from different cultures, different backgrounds, languages, different mentalities. Like in Israel, you know, the startup companies, the founders here, they say we have such an open mentality, and it's, you know, we want to get closer to the Asian people, but it's hard because, you know, they have their culture for their reasons, you know, they're like that. So how do we activate this global connection in a way that really, really benefits the company? You know, what platforms do we need? What technology do we need? You know, maybe we need a big screen somewhere, you know, and then we have to take all these examples of positive human connection and embed them into the brand instead of using all these image bank images and all this fake superficial stuff we've been using for marketing and advertising. That stuff's not going to work anymore. Now it has to be real. It has to be human. People have to feel love, warmth, connection, you know, radiating from the brand. And that's the companies they're going to want to work with. So for me, it's at the end of the day, you know, these things have to, even the products that we come into contact with every day, there's place there to get rid of all the stuff that we don't need to read, you know, and put examples of positive human connection so that we go to the public and we see positive human examples of positive human connection all around us. That's what we need to fill our environment with. So we'll get that conditioning, not just when we're in work. I like Jamelle's word conditioning. We'll get that conditioning everywhere, in our house, when we step out the house, you know, in the workplace. We need to get that new conditioning because we've been existing in an environment that's very toxic with all these negative examples of human interaction. And our kids are brought up in those environments. And it's, in a way, it's good that they're not going to school because they were getting a lot of very bad examples in school of human behavior. So this whole thing is actually good for us. We're growing. We're going to be, you know, we're learning to be better together. And there's a lot of benefit in it, but we just have to go along with the process and stop resisting what nature's trying to do.
Thank you. And Jamelle.
Yeah, there's so much here to say. Guys, buckle in. I'm going to go for about 10 minutes.
You already said it's not happening until 2030.
Yeah, so he's pooping around here.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said there. But if you're asking me what I want to see, what I would want to see is a bigger prioritization when it comes to emotional intelligence. And the only way that you can do that is by allowing it to become a part of the systematic way that you operate and run your business. And really what that means is that emotional intelligence development has to be on the balance sheet. It has to be in the budget, right? For example, if you said, you know, Jamelle, what do you see for, 2025 for AI, right? And we started talking about all these different AI strategies, then quite naturally, what you would be thinking is that we need to invest in those AI strategies. And so what I'd like to see is it, to be more commonplace for us to invest in emotionally intelligent cultures and then weave those behaviors into the way that we operate our business. So what does that look like? It means that when we look at performance, we consider these things. We have better ways to quantify the kind of behaviors that are in alignment. Right there, when it comes to hiring, these are the behaviors that we're looking for. When it comes to determining who's a fit, these are the behaviors that we're looking for. When it comes to creating a standard for how we want to perform and what culture is, we don't tolerate, right, the behaviors that are not in alignment. Of course, we help and we support people, right, when they have a misstep or when there's a challenge, definitely. But ultimately, if that's consistent, then we don't tolerate it. And the reason why that last point is really important is because your culture is only as good as the worst behavior that you tolerate. And I'm going to say that again. Your culture is only as good as the worst behavior that you tolerate. Because the moment that you tolerate it, you say that it's okay. And once it's okay, then people will replicate that behavior and it becomes a part of the DNA of that business. So I think that getting it on the balance sheet is really key. And I think that having emotionally intelligent systems and processes integrated into the way that we run our businesses is key as well. And if we could get there in 5 years, whoop-de-doo, sign me up.
Yes, love it. And Quinn?
Well, I echo the balance statement piece. I think it is something that has to be, we have to see investment in it, and it has to be something, you're quarterly, you're not just checking profits. And the fun part is, we mentioned it before, if you start monitoring this and you start engaging with this, and really checking in on this, then those other things kind of take care of themselves. Those goals, the goal is to be profitable, but how we get there is to be more human. And so, this is the thing that it just supports so many other things that, it's just nice to see it. And again, if we were going to lay out a 5-year plan, okay, what are we going to do? How do we start this conversation? How do we start integrating it? And also letting it become, because it's not a marathon. I mean, it's not a sprint, it is a marathon. How do we make sure that we are doing that? What's the worst thing they can do is, well, we're going to have this 2-day seminar once a year, and we're all going to come together. We're going to talk about just, it doesn't live there, right? It lives in the day to day. And, the best type of learning is when we are, we're teaching each other, you're having these open discussions. Oh, hey, I noticed this, there's ways. And that's one of the things, we encourage with a lot of people we work with is, keep the conversation going. If you're only talking about this, when we're here or we're on our follow-up calls or we're doing that, you're missing all those other opportunities, right? And so that's the piece that we really want to see it just become holistically ingrained into, it is part of the culture. And because it's part of the culture, we're going to budget for it just like we would any other piece that's really important. And, and watch what happens beyond that is, those other things that we're so worried about are really going to fall into place.
Thank you. And Teresa?
So I had a conversation with the CEO a couple of weeks ago, and he started with describing pain points. He's like, every company I've been in, whether I was the CEO or whether I was a VP or an individual contributor, it all went south when people lost sight of the mission, the vision, the purpose, the piece that connected us all together as to why we were there in the first place. And it went south when that was lost because what was prioritized was this number, that number, so on and so forth. And he continued to speak for about 5-6 minutes. And then he said, so when we keep growing, something I'm definitely going to have to do is I'm going to have to automate our mission, our purpose, our vision, because I'm not going to have time to really dig in with that with all the new people coming in. And I was like, whoa, you just cut yourself off at the knees 5 minutes ago. You said that's why you left companies, is because they let that go. And now you want to automate it because you don't have quote unquote time for it. I'm like, I know we're not working together yet, but you got to shift that if we're ever going to get anywhere with emotional intelligence. And he said, oh my God, thank you so much for calling me out on that. I totally almost missed that I was willing to sacrifice it in order to grow bottom line, so on and so forth. I said, yeah, that is primarily the problem, is this sort of autopilot not paying attention. So if I think about 2025, I think about Claude Silver, a chief heart officer, someone dedicated to the humanity of the workplace. Emotional intelligence is a skill set dedicated to the humanity of the workplace. So do you want to have a chief human officer, a chief heart officer, a chief EI officer? I don't care what you want to call them. It's putting them in your company with a dedicated focus that this is their job and it's their only job. And
but also give them the power to act upon it, because sometimes you give people titles and they don't have the authority, or they don't have the budget, or they don't have the license to act upon it and to do something within the company.
Yeah, if we're saying it's important, we have to put the money and time and effort behind saying that it's important, just as we would anything else we're currently saying is important.
Yeah, thank you. I so enjoyed this conversation, and I'm already sad that it's ending, but this looks like maybe, let's see in a half year or next year where emotional intelligence is at in the world, and see if we are coming closer towards the wishes that you all shared. I really enjoyed the conversation, and for all the listeners and all those people who are watching, I would like to say thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and it was amazing. Thank you all for being awesome and sharing your wisdom regarding emotional intelligence. So thank you.
Thank you,
for having us.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.